Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Lead Center webinar, an overview of group discovery. We're so excited to have all of you here today and very much appreciate you joining us. My name is Elizabeth Jennings. I am the Assistant Project Director for the Lead Center, and I will be your facilitator today. I'm also extremely pleased to have with us our subject matter experts on group discovery and customized employment, Abby Cooper with Mark Golden Associates and Janet Stevely with Griffin Hammis Associates. As many of you know, the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities, or as we call it, the LEAD Center, is a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. I'd like to extend a welcome to all of you today from Chris Button, the Supervisory Policy Advisor with the Workforce System Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment Policy. Those of you who have attended our other webinars know that our partners at the Office of Disability Employment Policy typically provide you with a welcome. They're having some technical difficulties at their offices today, so we're sorry not to have them here with us, but we're very pleased that you all were able to join us, and we extend a welcome from ODEP. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Nakia Matthews, so she can provide you some housekeeping tips for participating today.
Good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel, which you see below. If you accidentally close this panel or if the sound becomes unintelligible, you can reopen this panel from the top menu item by going to Communicate, Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the number you see here, and you do not need to enter an attendee ID. And I will also copy and paste this information into the chat box. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which appears in the lower right-hand corner of the webinar platform. If you want to make the Media Viewer panel larger, you can minimize some of the other panels like Attendees, Chat, or Q&A, and conversely, if you do not need this panel, you can minimize it. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat box or the Q&A box to send any questions you have during the webinar to me, Nakia Matthews, or Elizabeth Jennings, and we will direct the questions accordingly. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar platform, you may also ask questions by emailing them directly to Elizabeth Jennings at eJennings@ndi-inc.org. Please note this webinar is being recorded, and the materials will be placed on the Lead Center website at the URL you see below. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send a message to me, Nakia Matthews, or you may also email me at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org.
Thank you so much, Nakia. As many of you know, the LEAD Center's mission is to advance sustainable individual and systems-level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for individuals across the spectrum of disability. We're very pleased to offer you today more information on group discovery and customized employment as you received in our last webinar, so as we see these as innovations that can support the economic and employment goals of individuals with disabilities. Just to take a moment to review today's agenda, today you're going to receive a review of the learning objectives. You're going to learn about group discovery and its purpose, the group discovery process, outcomes of group discovery, how group discovery and customized employment go together, and then we're going to try to allocate plenty of time to answer any questions that you may have. If you could, as Nakia mentioned, please provide us with your questions through the chat features and the Q&A area, and any questions that we're not able to address today, we will capture and provide you with answers after the webinar. As a result of today's webinar, we trust that you will have a better understanding of group discovery as an alternate assessment tool. You will have a better understanding of the group discovery process. You will have a better understanding of the interplay of group discovery and customized employment, and you'll have examples of what job seekers learn in group discovery. You'll find as we go throughout the day that customized employment is going to be discussed. If you didn't have a chance to join us last month for the customized employment webinar, we're going to provide you with that archive link at the end of today's presentation. So just hold tight for that information, and you'll have plenty of time to bring yourself up to speed at your own pace. I'm now very pleased to welcome Abby Cooper to lead us through the discussion today on group discovery.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for being on the line. What I'd like to just start off with is just talking a little bit about group discovery, and it may be a tad redundant for people that were on Janet's webinar last month on customized employment because there's tremendous overlap. So I apologize for that, but hopefully there'll be new information for you too. Just to talk just for a second on how group discovery is structured. It is 7 two-hour sessions designed to help the job seeker understand what they need to obtain employment. And usually when we think about employment and what a job seeker needs, we think about it from the employer's perspective. So we think about it in the sense of, well, you need more training, you need to be more articulate, you need particular skills, you need to present yourself in a different light. And that's like a more traditional approach of how we view employer, is how does a person present themselves like the perfect candidate to the employer. What group discovery does is it takes it from a very different angle. It looks at it in terms of what do you, job seeker, need to be successful in a job? What type of environment do you need? What type of supervisor do you need? What are you doing? And when are you at your best? So it starts from who the person is and what they need as opposed to what the employer needs, which is a very different perspective. The group is made of 7 to 10 job seekers, and the reason for it capping at 10 is usually group discovery has one facilitator, and frequently the people that attend group discovery are folks that need some additional support and functioning in a group. So the 7 to 10 seems to work really well for folks. What job seekers get out of group discovery is they get to determine the employment tasks that fit who they are. And let me stop right there, because as I go through this, I'm going to talk a lot about tasks.
I'm sorry, Abby. We're getting some messages asking if you could please speak up.
Okay. Sorry. As we go through this, I'm going to talk about tasks rather than job descriptions, because one key component of customized employment and one key component of group discovery is that we look at tasks within a job that fit who that person is and contributions that they have to offer an employer rather than whole job descriptions. Because by looking at discrete tasks, you get to see more skills of an individual, and an individual gets to see more of what they could offer in an employer. It also, in group discovery, people also learn what their conditions are around employment that they need to be successful. Probably people on this line, some of you probably have young children, and probably one of your conditions for employment is flexibility in your workday so you can leave if a child gets sick. What happens frequently when we work with people who are chronically unemployed or have a lot of complexities around employment? We tend to negate their conditions. We tend to negate what they need to be successful or what they need to make work, no pun intended, with their life. And so what group discovery does is it provides a person with all the information in order to actually visualize themselves working and know what they need to be successful. I recently worked with a gentleman who had, I believe it was, 25 jobs in the last year. That was obviously a person who wasn't paying attention to what they needed from an employment situation and what they needed to be doing. There are some expectations on the job seeker from group discovery. Job seekers are expected to attend all sessions, and job seekers will have homework they need to do between sessions, which means if a person's facilitating a group discovery, then they need to make sure that people understand the homework, and they need to find out if the person needs any additional support in order to be successful in completing the homework. So to give you a quick example in terms of one homework that a person has from group discovery is they're asked to interview 3 people that are positive about them working and can tell them what they see as their strengths. So the purpose of discovery, whether it's group, whether it's individual, or whether it's self-directed, the purpose of discovery is to lay the foundation for integrated employment that meets the job seeker's ideal characteristics and conditions. And what I mean by ideal characteristics is when a person is at their best. Most people on the telephone line are working. And anyone that's worked for a while kind of knows what situations they need to really shine in employment. And that's kind of what group discovery helps somebody think about. Group discovery should result in a positive written description of each job seeker that includes his or her ideal characteristics of work, what they want, the tasks they want to do for pay, the employers that they would target to have either themselves go to or a job developer go to, how, if they have a disability, what can be disclosed about their disability and what can't. And this information is used to facilitate an employment planning session that a person utilizes to obtain employment. If a person is going from group discovery into self-employment, then that plan would highlight the next steps around self-employment. Group discovery is the first step in the process of obtaining a customized job. And on the slide, it says it's not a therapy group. And the reason that statement is there's a lot of folks that are kind of used to being in therapy groups, and they're used to meandering discussions and support. And although group discovery works on the energy of the group, it is not therapy. It is very concrete. The purpose of discovery group is for a person to learn what they need in order to be successful in employment. If we look at the traditional labor market, that works for a ton of people. A ton of people can send out their resume, fill out applications, shine in an interview, and get a job. There's also a whole nother set of people who send out their resume, and there's not a whole bunch on their resume. They fill out applications, but perhaps their spelling isn't very good, and they have to cross things out, or even worse, turn it in with incorrect spelling. And they don't interview well. They're the folks that a lot of folks are terrorized by interviews. They look at their feet. They don't look at the speaker, the interviewee, and they just don't present well. And they do all the right things. We have all seen people that come into the centers day after day, and they are doing all the right things, but they don't get a job. And so group discovery and looking at how you think about employment a little bit differently is helpful for that subset of folks that are job seekers. Because for anyone who's ever been unemployed and been unemployed for a period of time, you know how devastating it is, how your self-worth goes out the window, you know how lonely it becomes, and how pretty soon you give up. And so group discovery, one, allows people to see they have value. Two, it allows them to get support from the group. And three, it helps them have a plan that can result in employment. So the purpose of it is very concrete. So discovery group is an alternative approach. There are job seekers whose lives are very complex, and that can be for a whole host of reasons. It can be due to medical issues, or it can be due to family responsibilities. There was a mom in a discovery group that I had she's caring for her elderly mother. She had 2 children, one of whom was disabled and needed a lot of medical appointments. She had a very complex schedule due to her family responsibility. And she pretty much assumed she couldn't work because of that. And what Discovery Group allowed her to do was to see all the contributions and strengths that she had and to think about how she could negotiate with an employer around her schedule because of all the attributes she brought to the workplace. Certainly people who are homeless really struggle with obtaining employment, and that's a whole huge complexity. Folks who are criminal offenders, currently I'm working with a fellow who's a sex offender and happens to have cerebral palsy, and the complexities that he deals with every day in trying to obtain employment are impressive, and the ability for him to see what he offers is difficult, but with the help of the Discovery Group, he's starting to see that. Certainly folks in rural areas deal with lack of transportation or limited transportation. Certainly there's folks with disabilities that the complexities of their life mean they need an alternative. There's certainly folks who their skills are their skills are not readily apparent. There's a lot of people who have a lot of hidden skills. Anyone who's worked with people that are homeless, that live on the street, know that there are incredible skills that population has, but they need to be teased out. They're not readily apparent. A person's lack of experience sometimes makes it extremely difficult for them to obtain employment. And I already mentioned the difficulty in interviewing. So some job seekers have and you work with folks every day, some job seekers have just totally given up. They figure it's no point in applying because nobody's going to hire me. And their experience has been true to the point that they're saying that. So they need an alternative. For some people, returning to work is terrifying, and they need the support of the group to figure out how they would be successful. There recently was a job center in Georgia that used group discovery with their TANF recipients. And most of the people in the group had been unemployed for a very long time. Some had never been employed. And at the end of the discovery group, 70% job seekers went to work. That's pretty impressive to me. And it certainly makes sense to me that there are some people that need an alternative approach and need more support in order to be successful. So if any one of these litany of items I just mentioned is true for some job seekers you're working with, you might want to think about it. You might want to think about group discovery, because by looking at the positive, by utilizing the energy of the group, it creates motivation, and most importantly, the belief that work is possible. I have never in my life known anyone, and that's anyone on this phone, anyone anywhere, that has gone to work if somebody doesn't believe they can work. You know, when Einstein developed the theory of relativity, and probably many people on the line already know this, but he was on a train looking out the window, and when asked later how come it came to him, he said, if I didn't believe it was possible, I never would have seen it. I never would have seen how it could happen. And I firmly believe that about work. I firmly believe anyone looking for work, if they do not believe it's possible, they can't see how it can happen. So what group discovery allows participants or job seekers to do is to create an image of themselves working, to have a picture in their head in terms of what does it look like? What's the pacing? What's the interaction and communication like at this workplace? What am I doing? What do I bring to the table? All of those things help make it real. All of those things help somebody gain an image and start helping them see how they could obtain employment. It also, we all know looking for a job is not anybody's fun-filled task. You need to have a lot of energy to get employed. And group discovery helps people have that energy, and it helps job seekers understand the components they need to be successful. Whether it means that I need a break every 2 hours to lay down because I have a bad back, or whether it means that I need directions in pictures and shown to me rather than just machine gunned at me, or whether it means I need a later start time because where I live I have to walk 2 miles for the bus, and then the bus only runs at certain times. Whatever it is, it starts giving people the power to start thinking about what do I need to really contribute in this workplace. So discovery, group discovery, or discovery is the foundation for customized employment. And customized employment is a totally different approach to employment. It starts with a person. It starts with figuring out who they are, what their strengths are, what their needs are, what they bring to the table. And then it's negotiating a job for that person that meets both the applicants or the job seekers' needs and the employer's needs. To give you a quick example, there was a woman that went through group discovery that was very had really good skills in housekeeping. And she also was interested in working in a hospital. It turned out that the local hospital paid their nurses, I believe, $75 an hour. And one of the nurses' duties was to clean a patient's room after they left. Well, they're basically, the employer was paying an awful lot of money to have that room perfect by a nurse. And it met his needs by hiring this woman to clean the hospital room at, I'm sad to say, a far less wage. But it's kind of looking at what's the employer's needs and what are the applicant's needs, and how do you match them together, and what are the pieces that need to be negotiated. Customized employment relies very heavily on negotiation. So discovery, which I'm sure you know by now, and group discovery is a process. It is not a test. But it's a process that helps clearly determine what a person's strengths are. And at the end of group discovery, it can lead to either wage employment or self-employment based on what the person has determined on what they need. It's built on, which I've alluded to repeatedly, on unbundling demand. Currently, in most employment situations, everything's bundled together. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to read The Workforce of One, but what the Workforce of One talks about is how companies are now unbundling in order to attract talent, in order to keep talent. Well, that's pretty much what customized employment does. It unbundles the demands into tasks to take advantage of discrete competencies. You know, any one of us, there are many jobs we look at and we'd say, I don't have the skills to do that. But if you broke it down, there'd be pieces of that job you could do. There's pieces of everybody on the phone's job that other people could do, but they can't do the whole job. So it's like breaking down that task, and is there a need from the employer to have that broken out for that discrete task to be done? How does that improve the workflow? How does that improve the employer's bottom line? You know, job seekers that have complex lives or haven't worked in a long time, frequently they don't have that whole package. They can't do everything on that job description, but they have competencies to offer. For example, you have a mail delivery, and within mail delivery, you have to, on a city campus, you have to drive the mail truck. But yet, I might be able to deliver that mail with using a cart and having no driving. So pulling out different pieces allow more people to go to work. And group discovery allows job seekers to understand what they have to offer the employer in relationships to tasks that meets the employer's unmet need. One exercise in group discovery is looking at all the tasks somebody would like to do for pay, and then thinking about what employer has those tasks and why that employer would be interested in unbundling those tasks. So through group discovery, a person's going to learn what they have to offer an employer, what they need to be successful, how focusing on their strengths and interests can lead to employment, and how that's a better approach than focusing on their deficits and what's missing and what they need in order to obtain employment. And viewing employment as a way to meet both their and the employer's needs is an effective approach. Because the other thing, one, it results in employment. Two, it allows the person to believe that they have something to offer. And three, it's incredibly empowering. If I believe I have nothing to offer and I need to do all these things in order to just get an entry-level job that doesn't even meet my expenses, that's not a very empowering way. And if I hear How will everybody start somewhere, Abby? So this is a good job for you to take now because you really have no experience. Maybe if I'm a tenacious enough person, I will keep that job. Or maybe I'll be like the fellow that I just worked with who's had tons of cruddy jobs in the last year because he didn't slow down to understand he had something to offer. So let's think for a second what a job seeker needs to know to discover the right job. Obviously, they need to think about what their credentials are. Do they have any education? Do they have any special training? What are their hobbies? And are there any hobbies or interests that they're willing to think about doing for pay? What are their responsibilities? And everybody knows that life is becoming increasingly more complex, so people have lots of responsibilities. And what are their complexities they deal with? Whether it's anger control, whether it's living on the street, whether it's the inability to read, and how do you function with that? But what are they, and what are the solutions? What are their challenges? What are the skills they bring to the table? And what are their financial needs? How much money do they need to cover their basic expenses? If they go to work, what are they willing to give up in order to earn the wage that they want? If they're on benefits, have they talked to a benefits planner? Do they know the impact of the wage on their benefits? So really looking at that whole complex world of financial needs. And what is their transportation needs? Because it's like it will help to get a job you can't get to. So in group discovery, job seekers clarify their conditions, their interests, their contributions, and tasks. So at the end of it, they know those. That is written down. They have it. What they will do, the job seeker or a representative can use this information to meet with employers in an effort to negotiate a customized job description or self-employment. And that's why I say negotiation is a big piece of this. The employers are selected from a list that's been created in group discovery. Remember we talked about that brainstorming? Who has those tasks? Why would they have a need for you to do it? Is that employer, can you get to that employer? Does that employer pay enough for you to meet your monthly expenses? All of those things were looked at and thought about in discovery group. But at the end of discovery group, I got a plan. I know where I'm going to go or where somebody else is going to go for me. The other thing, and I apologize, I forgot to mention, the other thing that is looked at in discovery group is if I'm using a representative or if I'm using a job developer, what can that job developer say about me? What can she or he disclose about me? What can he or she say about my disability? If I have a disability, or I have a criminal record, or I have other sensitive information. And if I'm securing employment for myself, at what point am I going to disclose sensitive information? And what's the best approach for me to take? What group discovery and what discovery does is it looks at the past and current experience. Now, it is in a group setting, but still the job seeker is the controller of the information. So the job seeker in group discovery never has to reveal anything he or she does not want to. But the job seeker is informed. The more he or she knows and the more he or she thinks about it, the better fit the job or the business will be. And job seekers are finding out information about themselves. And the support of the group helps them extend their perspective, because we all know that we've worked with people who sometimes don't really have the most realistic perspective on what they can do for employment. But yet, when a professional tells a person, that just might not work, there can be lots of resistance from some people. But when you're in a group setting with your peers, lots of times you're far more able to hear that and expand your thinking. So it helps them figure out what they need, and whether they need wage or self-employment. I'm sorry, I just went too far, so let me. One thing that's stressed in group discovery is information is neutral. For most of us, we view information, particularly information about ourselves, as good or bad. There's a great Tom Waits song that says, there's a line in the song that says, all you can see is what you lack. And for many people, that's true. We see everything that we lack. We don't see what's good about us. And we frame information in terms of, oh, that's a bad story about me, I'll be seen in a bad light. Or that's good, that'll be good, I'll present that. As opposed to thinking about it, it's just information, it's neutral, it's just to get a clear picture of what you need to be successful. And the importance of having all the information before you jump to any conclusion. So I know for a few cynics on the line, if there are any, you're thinking, yeah. This is really nice. But why the heck would employers customize? But in reality, customized employment is a win-win strategy that meets the needs of employers as well as job seekers. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is, currently in our economy, there are lots of unmet needs in the workplace. And part of the reason there's unmet needs is a lot of people have had to lay off a lot of people, and everybody has had to multitask. And so there's lots of things that are not getting done. One thing that customized employment allows a business to think about is, perhaps if I created a position that targeted some of the things that are not getting done, it may improve my workflow, and it may increase my bottom line. Or there's also employers that have contracted out so many pieces of it, it's starting to become confusing, and it would be easier to bring it in-house to one position. But one thing customized employment does, just as it looks at the unique strengths and contributions of the job seeker, it looks at the unique needs of the employer. And if the contributions of the job seeker meet the unique needs of the employer and their unmet needs, then there's a piece to negotiate. But if it doesn't, then there's no piece to negotiate. And frequently in job development, people forget to talk about how they can meet the employer's needs and look at what their unmet needs are. So, we know that there are tons of unmet needs in tasks. There may be, a fellow just recently finished group discovery, and he ended up getting a job for himself at an employer scanning documents, because that employer had never thought about it that way, but he had files full of documents that needed to be scanned because they were going paperless. And he had dumped it all on one person who did not like the task. And when this person just asked, do you have any unmet office needs? That was immediately brought up. So in any workplace, there are unmet needs that sometimes the person can address, such as access data entry, relieving an employee during breaks, augmenting low-producing employees. There's also a lot of times there's episodic duties that you can bundle with other unmet needs that can allow a person to obtain employment. Certainly have all been in offices where the receptionist is just totally overwhelmed and needs some help. And it's really fun, or maybe I have a warped sense of fun, but it's really fun if you just start, as you go through your daily life, and you look at the places of businesses where you go, you will start just seeing a lot of unmet needs in every business you go into. Doesn't mean that all of those businesses are going to hire, but it does mean we need to start paying attention to it. And that's one thing in group discovery we have people start thinking about. I mentioned about customization in terms of the workforce of one, where it's becoming popular, but there isn't anybody on this telephone line that has not customized their job if they have worked there for a little while. All of us, once we get our job and we're comfortable in it, we begin to kind of customize our job to meet our individual needs. We kind of manage to worm our way into things that we're really good at and cut deals with people in the office for things we're not so good at, but we all customize it. And one way employers reward their high-producing employees is allowing them more opportunity to customize their jobs because they know they get the most out of it. So customization to employers and negotiating around it is not a new thing. Businesses have made a fortune in customizing customers' needs. All this is doing is saying to an employer, let's customize your employees' needs to meet your needs. In customized employment seeks to start that process before the job's developed. Because we all know that when people get in trouble in their job, frequently it's because they're doing tasks that don't fit for them or the environment doesn't fit for them. And so if some of that negotiation happens up front, the employer gets a win-win because the employer gets the right employee, and we all know that turnover is expensive. He or she also gets unmet needs met that makes his or her business more productive. So the group discovery provides information that job seekers need for those negotiations if they're going to do it themselves. And if they're going to have a job developer do it for them, it's a godsend because the job seeker can tell the job developer, this is what I need, this is what I want to do, and here's the environment that I want to work in, and it saves a lot of time. So just according to the U.S. Department of Labor, customized employment means individualizing the employment relationship between the employee and the employer in a way that meets the needs of both. And we all know, anyone that has bought a lemon of a used car knows no negotiation makes any sense unless it meets both parties' needs. And discovery, whether it be group, individual, or facilitated, creates an individual determination of what that person brings to the table so that they can meet the employer's needs. So why I say also it's a godsend to job developers is I don't know how many people on this line are job developers, but you know as a job developer you waste a lot of time knocking on the wrong doors. What customized employment helps and what the group discovery plan helps with is knocking on the right doors. So just some quick features of customized employment is the customized relationship is completely voluntary on the employer's part. It's not part of ABA. It's not part of affirmative action. It's really voluntary, and the employer does it because it meets his or her needs, and it makes him or her more productive. I think this is critical to this next point, is the job seeker decides about positive disclosure of work impact of their disability or challenge. You know, when to disclose your disability or other challenges you face is a really tricky question. And allowing the job seekers to decide where that comes in the process is very empowering. And it also dovetails with ongoing supports or other services as needed for a person. So just to recoup or review for a second, you know, who needs customized employment? Kind of we all do, but since the resources are tight, some people don't need customized employment to get a job. There are people out there who are great at getting themselves a job. But sometimes those people need customized employment to keep a job. They need some things negotiated on a job for them, and they need to really understand what kind of environment they are going to shine in and be really useful to the employer. Because the truth is, there isn't anyone I've ever met that doesn't want to be useful on their job. Customized employment and group discovery helps people process that and know where they'll be really useful. You know, some people need to customize just to get the energy to think about working. And these are lots of folks who have been chronically unemployed and have repeatedly been turned down for possibilities of employment. And so they need some help in even getting the energy to think this is possible. And certainly we all know people who need customized employment to make everything else in their life work. Their lives are phenomenally complex, and they have a lot of responsibilities, and they have a lot of issues. And in order to make work for them, no pun intended, they need to customize it. So what a job seeker is going to learn in discovery and in group discovery is an overall overview and introduction to customized employment, because people need to understand the connection between discovery and customized employment and where negotiation fits in. They're also going to understand and learn who they are in relationship to work. And we all have many different personas. And it's important to know what our work persona is and what we need from work, because every one of us works not just for money, although money's important, we also work for a host of other reasons, whether it's because we want to be useful, whether it's because we want social contact, connections, whatever it is. We work for a host of reasons. So understanding what those are. So when you look at a work environment, you know whether you're going to get what you need from that work environment beyond just money. What they need to be successful, and how to use their interests and contributions to find a job that fits them. I don't know if any of you have ever read Joseph Campbell. He's a mythologist, but he talks a lot about when you follow your passion, invisible doors will open for you. And I kind of think that's true with discovery. If we find, and if a person knows what their contributions are and what they're really interested in, then that job they find fits them and they want to keep it. They also learn and have a list of employers who can use what they have to offer and how to use the information learned to create an employment plan. And that the discovery group ends with a person having an employment plan. So to give you just a few quick samples of some of the activities that the job seeker performs in group discovery, one thing we look at is dependable strengths. And what a dependable strength is a strength you always fall back on. It's a strength you enjoy using. So we identify the tasks that a job seeker always enjoys doing. We make a list of the different jobs and duties performed in those jobs and circle the duties, their favorite duties, to find which tasks the job seeker has that are their dependable strengths, and to take that information as they kind of think about what they want to do for pay. They also, as I mentioned earlier, they also interview people who know them well and who are positive about them working. And that's very important because for a lot of people who are chronically unemployed and face a lot of issues in obtaining work, they have an awful lot of naysayers in their life. And it's very reinforcing to be able to interview somebody who has a lot of good things to say about you. So they will, through the 7 weeks, they interview at least 3 people and ask them what they see as their strengths, what they see as their contributions, and then they decide which one of their contributions and strengths they agree with, which ones surprise them, and then we do a group exercise around what type of employer would need those strengths. They make a list of employers in the job seeker's neighborhood. They note which employers the job seeker wants to learn more about, and the facilitator helps them arrange an informational interview with some of those employers. Job seekers are provided with their own discovery portfolio binder where they can keep all their discovery information that they've obtained in so that they can refer back to it. So, Elizabeth, I think I've left enough time for questions, and I sure hope there are.
Great. Thank you so much, Abby. I just want to take a moment. We have Janet Stevely on the line, who is also our complimentary subject matter expert on customized employment and discovery. And I just wanted to ask Janet if she has anything she'd like to add before we tackle some of the questions that have come in. Nakia, could we unmute Janet, please? Okay, Janet.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks for listening today. Thanks, Abby. I think
Sure.
Abby, great overview there, and I just would like to add that I think this is a really fun process, and like she said, it's really empowering for the job seekers and gets people excited and gets them feeling like they have some support, the support of their group as well as the support of professionals that are working with them. So I'll just add that, and let's go for questions.
Great. Thanks, ladies. So for those of you on the line that had a chance to participate last month, you know that we had Janet and Abby both answer questions because they're providing some complementary information to each other and because they've both done so much work out in the field. So now's a great time. If you haven't had a chance to pop your questions into the Q&A box, please do so now, and I'm gonna toss them out to you both. First question is Group Discovery a formal program that is available for workforce professionals to use to train participants? And by this I mean, is there a train the trainer or any other training materials available to facilitate an effective discovery program? And why don't we address that to you first, Abby?
Okay. We are rolling out a program in both Kansas and Illinois. That is a formal, we're doing 2 trainings in each of those states, and we're doing Train the Trainer to how you do group discovery. I'm going to refer back to you, Elizabeth. I don't think there'd be any problem making the curriculum available to other job centers if they're interested.
So I did see, I first want to say thank you to those of you on the line who are from Kansas and Illinois as we've just started this partnership through the LEAD Center. If you're on the line and you're interested in bringing group discovery to your American Job Center or to your local disability organization or workforce organization, please send me an email and we'll start compiling a list of those folks. And as that curriculum is more fully made available and is vetted for its efficacy, we'll be sure to reach back out to you to provide you some information on how you can use it also to provide group discovery in your own organization. So the next question we have is, how does confidentiality impact the role of the facilitator? Could you mention the aspects that are self-generated and those that are steered by the facilitator?
Okay, the way confidentiality is dealt with is that every job seeker attending the group decides what they want to share and what they don't want to share. So if there's anything confidential that they do not want to share, they do not share it. If there's any confidential information that they do not want the facilitator to know, they can simply say, I don't want to talk about it. We have not used confidentiality forms because the facilitator does not share any of the information that she or he learns discovery through. But based on your question, it's got me thinking maybe we should do a confidentiality form, but we haven't thus far. And I apologize. Can I hear the second part of the question?
Sure. The second part is, which aspects of group discovery are self-generated and which are steered by the facilitator?
Wow, that's a great question and an incredibly tricky question. The way that it usually works is for each of the 7 sessions, there is learning objectives, there is a PowerPoint or prepared information that the facilitator goes through, and then there are group exercises. So the group exercises are more generated from the peers, from the job seekers, and the formal presentation is generated from the facilitator. What's tricky, I guess, is one thing that the facilitator has to do is tease out some of the information, because one big piece of discovery is translating it all. Just because I like gardening doesn't automatically translate into a job. So helping the job seeker kind of take all the information that they've learned and translating it is a big role of the facilitator. And sometimes that requires that happening after group discovery because some people don't want to do it in a group. I'm not sure I answered your question, so I just want to double check. Is that what you're getting at, and does that answer the question?
Okay, so if that didn't address the question, please resubmit back into the Q&A box, and we'll see if we have time to address that further. Another question about the group discovery process is, how do you address the social and interpersonal behaviors that are expected in the workplace and in customer service situations? What kind of interface is there with on-site coaches and counselors?
Pretty much none, other than if somebody goes on an informational interview. Group discovery is not meant to be the only thing a person can do. So if a person is also working with job coaches or is also involved with an agency that is providing them additional support, that too will occur. But the 7 sessions in group discovery really look at who the person is and what they have to offer an employer. Now, let's say I am a facilitator, and one thing somebody says they have to offer is great people skills. Well, let's say I have really stinky people skills. Then one of the reasons for having the person interview 3 people at least is to see what strengths other people say about them, to be able to have a conversation that kind of says, well, there's these strengths that people really see in you, and people skills wasn't one of them. Should we explore some of these other skills that you may have? So it's only 2 hours for 7 weeks. So it can't do everything for everybody.
Abby, along the lines of what takes place during the group sessions, could you give some examples of types of group exercises or assessment tools that are utilized in these group discovery sessions?
Sure. There isn't any assessment that's used. Remember, discovery is really meant to be an alternative to assessment. So if we go to the first group discovery, well, the facilitator will set ground rules with the group. It'll talk about 2 different approaches between labor market and customized employment. It will then talk about what discovery is, and then it'll talk about different components of work, like when it occurs, what you do, interactions, pacing, environment, expectations, and it would have an exercise where you would sit with a partner and you would talk about each of those components that you need to be successful. It also starts with an exercise where you introduce yourself to a partner, where you tell them 3 of your contributions you have to offer, and then the person presents you back to the audience, back to the group in terms of what you have to offer, or what you say you have to offer. And when you meet with the partner in terms of the different components of work that you need, after you do that, then there's a larger group exercise with us all up on the wall, where people start to think about what kind of employer has that kind of pacing, has those tasks, has that type of environment. There's an exercise around conditions and thinking about what your conditions are and why. After that session, people go home and they make a list of what their conditions are and prioritize them, and they have to be able to come back to the group and tell them why those are their conditions. Do you want me to keep? Does that give you enough, or do you want some more exercises?
I think that was pretty good, Abby.
Okay.
A follow-up question to that, and maybe we could have you answer, and then pass off to Janet to elaborate a little bit more.
She could answer first.
Either way, it's up to you guys. One person wants to know, in addition to the group work, do you also meet with folks individually?
And yes and no. How's that for a vague answer? If there's a need and if somebody's struggling or if somebody requests it, yes. And usually in group discovery, there's a wide gamut of people that have participated in group discovery, and lots of people are able just to go through it and they're just fine. But there's also folks that struggle, and as a facilitator, yeah, I meet with them in between because the information isn't making sense to them, or they just need some additional support. So I guess that's a long way of saying yes. Janet?
Janet, I wonder if you could also take this opportunity to just kind of let folks know about the other approach to discovery, which is individual discovery.
Oh, sure. I mean, in a more facilitated, we're talking about group discovery here, but often discovery is done in a facilitated approach, which is more like a one-on-one, a professional working with one person and walking them through the discovery process that, seeks to get the same information on people's interests and skills and contributions and tasks, but it's done a little differently because it is more one-on-one. And the reason we're focusing on group discovery is because it seems that within the AJCs that group discovery, it kind of fits with the way AJCs do business. And also there's lots of people who can, benefit from that group experience and learning from each other, and who have the skills that, a group setting makes sense. For some people, a more individual approach would make more sense. But in terms of your question, I know I've done some kind of adapted versions of group discovery where we've met as a group, but I have met with people individually as well, partly because, and it's kind of coming back to some of the confidentiality questions, that people had things they wanted to talk about that they didn't want to talk about in a larger group. So that might be one reason to meet with people individually, or just because they do need some extra help, putting together the homework assignments or getting through some of that. But I think I'm kind of flipping back to that initial question about confidentiality, too, that if you're going to organize a group like this, you want to think about what you tell people up front, how you advertise and recruit people, so that they know it is a group process. And one thing I know Abby does this is, and we're going to be doing this in Kansas and Illinois, is having the groups establish their own ground rules. So maybe confidentiality would come up in there as well. But I think it's always important to offer people that opportunity to have some individual one-on-one time.
Thanks, ladies. The next question is, who is able to participate in group discovery sessions? This person would also like to know where are the groups offered and who funds the sessions?
Okay. There's a variety of ways. Through the LEAD Center, the group discovery that's going to occur in Kansas and Illinois is funded partially through LEAD. It's also funded partially through the DI grant. In other states, when it has happened, sometimes it's funded by providers. You have, particularly in mental health organizations that are shifting to employment and have traditionally not done employment, they have used group discovery, and it's paid through the agency, and then the employment services are paid through vocational rehabilitation. At this point, I'm not, well, there is, in Georgia, that I like. In Georgia, there is a program that vocational rehabilitation is paying for in group discovery. And there are other vocational rehabilitation agencies looking at that, but to my knowledge, the only one that I'm aware of is in Georgia.
Great, thanks. Anything to add to that, Janet?
I think, what we're doing with the Lead Center is training facilitators of group discovery, but through the project, too, we'll be developing materials and a facilitator's manual that can be available to people at a later date. So it's not necessarily an expensive activity. I would see it as part of the services AJCs would offer anyway. I know, like in my local area, VR has contracted with me to provide some group discovery sessions that it was a little different. It was leading up to a live resume event where we invited employers and had the participants actually use the skills that they learned to introduce themselves to employers and network with them. But I think funding could come from a variety of sources, but it's not a real expensive thing.
Mm-mm.
And I'd just like to add one thing, just so we're clear. The part of the reason why the Lead Center is really excited about customized employment and specifically introducing the group discovery approach to American Job Centers is because group discovery is a tool that could be beneficial to all populations of people, including individuals with disabilities. As Abby mentioned, this is a great opportunity for anybody who's been disconnected from the workforce to take a step back and take a closer look at not only what their skills and abilities are, but what are their ideal conditions of employment, and start to assess whether some of those ideal conditions of employment aren't being met, and thus their experience in the workforce isn't being as successful as it could be. So we're very hopeful that as you look at group discovery, that you'll consider not only individuals that you may be working with that have significant disabilities and need an alternative assessment tool to determine what their skills and abilities are, but that you'll also think about other populations of people like mature workers, like individuals with chronic health conditions, anybody who seems to need that time to reassess what work should look like for them. So we're going to step away from some of the questions around group discovery, and you both received several questions that really relate back to customized employment. The first is, I'm interested in learning the talking points for selling this proposition to an employer, unless there's a database of companies that have already indicated that they're in favor of customized employment.
Okay. I'll take it, and then I'll turn it over to Janet. To my knowledge, there are lots of companies around the country that are interested in customized employment. In terms of a database, I'm not aware of one. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just have never, ever seen one. In terms of the talking points, there's a couple talking points. And they're going to vary depending on who you're talking to, because like with any job development, you tailor it to the audience. But I'm gonna focus on some things that are a little bit different. With customized employment and working with an employer, you're really just there to say, hey, this is a different way to do it. Are you interested? You're not there to sell. You're there to say, we could look at your unmet needs. We could do an analysis of your workflow and present that to you, present a proposal to you, which you may or may not be interested in. I have a person who has these particular skills, has this to offer, and is very interested in working in a hummus factory. Whether there's a match or not, I don't know. This is what customized employment is, and you check. You say, is this something you're interested in? are you interested in kind of looking at addressing some of your unmet needs? And it's really far more of a conversation. And it's also it's not a sale. It's traditionally job development, you do a lot of sales on in terms of how great you are, how great your agency is, how great support employment is, or whatever approach you use. And this is really just a conversation of, here's this approach. Are you interested? Here is what I have to offer you. And so Janet?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that discovery kind of starts with people's interests is because those interests breed personal engagement with employers. So if somebody's interested in baking, say, through the process of discovery, that probably would come out in their plan, that this is something that they're interested in, that they have skills around, that they want to pursue. So what I would do next is, after starting with that interest, is help people think about how to get more information. So say if I'm a job developer working with somebody, we're going to go out and gather information about baking, but we're not going out and asking someone for a job. What we're doing is setting up informational interviews so that they can go out and learn more about that particular business's needs, but also about needs that are in that industry. So say if, as a result of this process, I go with Sally and we set up an informational interview at the ABC Bakery, we're not going in asking them for a job. We're going in to explore needs. And how I would set that up with the bakery is I might call and say, and the job seeker could do this themselves if they have the skills to do that, but I might say, hello, my name's Janet Stevely. I'm with Griffin Hammonds Associates, and I'm a career counselor working with a young woman named Sally, and Sally has a real interest in baking. And as I'm helping her develop her career plan, what we'd like to do is go out and interview some people who are working in that field. Would you be willing to meet with us for 20 minutes anytime, at your convenience, sometime in the next week, or something to that effect? So I'm setting it up just as I'm not asking for a job. I'm asking you for help and advice to help Sally with her career planning. And generally speaking, most people will say yes. They'll sit and talk to you. In fact, the trick usually is getting them to stop talking after 20 minutes. Not that you want them to, but, people will tend to keep talking. That they like to talk about their businesses. They like to share. And the more they're talking and sharing, the more opportunity there is for you to identify needs, either through what they're saying or through what you're seeing while you're there on site. So you might be, they might be telling you, oh, we don't really have any needs, but what you're seeing is that, there's a big rush, and the tables are dirty during the rush because whoever's running the sales can't get out there and clean the tables or whatever it is. So that's how I would go at that.
And if I can just add one more thing, usually another big difference is in customized employment, you don't do cold calls. So you try very hard to find either somebody, the job seeker or the job seeker support, know and to introduce you, or you send a letter of introduction to the employer. So you already have a relatively receptive audience.
Connections are good. And if you can build that into setting up the informational interview, saying, oh, hey, your Aunt Jane told me that you run the bakery, or, the Business Development Center recommended that we call you, or something like that.
Great, thanks. So also along the lines of customized employment, we received a question that asks, can you talk about how customized employment has been used in state and federal offices where set job descriptions must be used?
I can talk about federal, because I have more. Well, actually, I can talk about federal and I can talk about county. With federal, I have worked with Section A to have individuals with disabilities obtain employment. And what I have done is I've done an analysis of the work site where they want to hire them and have come back with suggestions saying, here's where I see your unmet needs, here where I see where this person could meet those needs. And I think that you could hire this person, if I'm reading regulations correctly, under office assistant rather than the title they were thinking of. So basically, the federal government, what I've done is been able to present them with an alternative to thinking about it. And then they decide whether or not that's worth it for them to pursue. And it has worked. In county, I don't really think I don't think I've ever done it in state that I can think of. In county government, I've done it, and they, have civil service rules. And what I did in county government, and this was years ago, but I went through every department in King County, which is the county for Seattle, where I live. I went through every department and did an analysis of every department of what the unmet needs were and where a person with a disability could possibly meet those needs. It was a really large report. So it wasn't customized in the sense that it wasn't focused on an individual. It was more focused on a cluster of people and really looking at what the needs were within each department. And that resulted in the county having an initiative where I forget what it is, 3% of their hires are folks with disabilities. So it's tricky, and it takes a long time, but it's doable. And I don't know about state. I apologize.
Janet, do you have anything to add?
Not a lot. I've had some, not so good experiences with that. I've had some people who basically didn't need a lot of customization who tried to use the Schedule A process for federal jobs. I think one of the best examples I have probably is with a city, and it was something I talked about in the last webinar, but we were working with a fellow who was described as a litter bug. He liked to clean up litter. He liked to clean up parking lots and stuff. So we'd approached the city on hiring him, and basically what the city had told us is that they had, crews who would do that for free, either, kind of youth crews or from the county jail or whatever. And the other thing with this fellow is he needed to have a lot of flexibility. He would typically respond no to anything anybody asked him to do. So we knew as part of the conditions for employment that he would he'd need to direct a lot of his work, and would need not a lot of excessive direction from other people, and need to be able to kind of control the work hours a little bit and things like that. So when the city had said, we could have him work here as long as he could work on the crew, we went, that doesn't work with his conditions of employment. So we kind of got away from that, and then a couple of things happened. I'd read in the paper that the fellow who I talked to had left, so I knew there was somebody new to negotiate with. It was on parole violation. He went to jail. But also, that's why I read it in the paper. Also, we'd seen the city mission statement hanging up in the post office, and it said, the city is committed to involving its youth in maintaining and improving the city, or something like that. So that was good, good to go back with. The other thing, so when I went back to negotiate with the new person, he not only was more open to the idea, but he had told me, he said, oh, you're talking about that new kid in town. And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, that's funny. He said, just the other day I was going home, and the city park had been vandalized, and he had told me that, and I didn't really listen to him. And then on my way home, I see all this garbage, and I had to stop. It took me 2 hours to clean it up. So this was a supervisor pay at time and a half, cleaning this up. So we wrote a proposal to the city saying, hey, why don't you hire Sean to pick up the excess, when it's high season or high times to pick up some extra help. And it had to be approved by the city council, and it took a long time, but they did hire him. I know one of our state offices, too, I know they do hire somebody, and I don't live in Salem. I'm in Oregon, and I'm in a rural part of Oregon, so I'm not real familiar with that situation, but I know it can be done. I know it's sometimes hard and slow.
Well, thank you, ladies, both so much. We still have more questions to be answered, but it's time to wrap up, so I wanted to take a moment to ask if our partners at the Office of Disability Employment Policy would like to make a comment before we wrap up for today. Chris?
Yeah, unmuted.
Okay, well, let's take a moment to just remind everybody on the line that we have our free webinar series every month. It's the last Wednesday of the month from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. It's always Eastern Time. Webinars include 3 mini-series. We've completed our one on economic advancement. Today's webinar was the second of 3 on employment. And starting in August, we'll be shifting our focus to leadership or public policy. And we've given you a link there. We hope you'll continue to join us. If you're interested in more information about using Discovery to identify employment goals, we're going to do one more webinar on this next month, and this is targeted to individuals with disabilities to advise them on some of the things that they can do to prepare for a group discovery session or to facilitate some of these pieces on their own. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to get more information, to get some ideas about how you can do some discovery with those that you work with, and it's an opportunity for you to invite other people that you serve to join the webinar. We also want to invite you to check out the archived webinar on customized employment for a deeper introduction to customized employment and self-employment. This took place last month, and the archive is available for your viewing at your leisure. If you need any contact information, we have up for Abby Cooper and Janet Stevely, and we've put mine in the box. It's eJennings@ndi-inc.org. Thank you again to Abby Cooper and to Janet Stevely for a great overview of group discovery and the connection with customized employment. If you're on the line and you're from Kansas or Illinois, please feel free to send me an email. I will make sure that you get information about the upcoming face-to-face trainings on group discovery that are coming to your neck of the woods. For the others on the line, I hope you'll continue to join us. You'll send in any future questions that you have, and you'll check the archive of this webinar for answers to the questions that we didn't get to today. Thank you again, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.